Hello, good afternoon. I'm Lucy Smith and I'm the director of MIPJunior. And I'm really thrilled to announce our next keynote speaker, Fred Seibert. Fred really is a powerhouse in kids' entertainment. As the founder of Frederator Networks and the chief executive officer of WOW Unlimited Media, he was also the first creative director of MTV and the last president of Hanna-Barbera Cartoons. The various enterprises that fall under the Frederator name include the leading online cartoon network, an independent production company with shows on Cartoon Networks, Nickelodeon, Netflix, and also dozens of YouTube channels. In his keynote address today, Fred will offer his unique and wise insights into a changing landscape for children's entertainment. He'll talk about where the business has come from and where it's going. At the conclusion of his remarks, Fred will be joined by Jessie Cleverly, who's the creative director of Wild Seed Studios in the UK, for what is, I'm sure, going to be a fascinating Q&A. So now please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Mr. Fred Seibert. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy, and thanks as usual to MIPJunior for having me come and speak today. I'm very honored to be here, and especially in this beautiful room that I don't think any of us have been in before. And we're pretty filled up. It's great. So, you know, when I was called for this talk, I logically asked what the subject ought to be for the talk, and they said, well, we'd really like to get your take on what goes on in the next 10 years in our business. And when I stopped laughing, I pointed out that I had a really hard time trying to even figure out what's going on in the next 10 months. And my partner, Michael Hirsh, mentioned to me that we probably had a hard time thinking about the next 10 minutes. And I think for everyone here, that's completely the case. We are in this, I would like to call it a unique moment, but I think when I first got into the business, you know, almost 40 years ago, it was also a unique moment. And I think that for whatever disruption is going on in our world now and whatever we're going through, at every minute, one of the things that is both exciting and frightening about what we do is that we have no idea what's going on. And so I had to rethink the thesis that they asked me to think about. And it kind of goes like this. For most of my career, I come to a conference like this, and when you get into that sort of deep cocktail hour of philosophical thinking, people are wondering, okay, what's most important? Is it distribution? Is it content? If you make something good, will people show up? Will they not show up? And honestly, at least from my perspective, I think about it completely differently. I don't think about it as content. I don't think about it as distribution. I only think about one thing, which is that for the last 100 years in the media business, for the next 100 years in the media business, the only thing that counts is us, the audience. For those of us who are sitting at home or sitting out at a cafe looking at a video on our telephone, or wandering around and listening to a podcast or whatever it is that we're spending our time, we, the audience, are the most important part of the puzzle. And I think that, you know, all too often in our business, the thing that is thought about the least is the audience. I mean, at least at MIPJunior here, we're about kids. And we know that we're about kids. But beyond that, I'm not so sure that we know all that much. The information that is related to the audience is really held in, you know, two different areas, right? One is that the networks that most of us do business with, they have had in the past the most information related to the audience. The problem is they sort of keep it secret from you. I don't know how many here are producers that are making things. So you know that if you want to find out information about your audience from your network, they're very stingy about it. They hold back, they tell you the least amount, maybe they'll tell you the rating. But if you want to go a little further and you want the quarter-hour rating, they sort of give it to you. And then if you ask for the rating for the show before yours or the show after yours, they're sort of stingy about it. In the United States, I know that if I want the Nielsen company to give me minute-by-minute ratings, which from my perspective are very, very important, they only complain to me about it that they have to pay an extra fee to Nielsen, and so they don't really give it to me, all that much. And now those of us who are in business with some of the streamers, I don't have to tell anybody because it has become common knowledge, they tell you nothing, right? I mean, they tell you absolutely nothing. And that's scary from our perspective. The other place that information really resides is those of us who are producers actually think we're magicians. We all think we know something. We think that we're smarter than every other producer in the room, and that we have like a magical instinct and a magical gut, and that's how we make all of our decisions. We actually are making it based on information, but we haven't really organized that information in any kind of way that we know what to do with. We just come out and say, well, my show's good because I'm good, and we do all that. But the challenge is that without information, our instincts are not very useful. And the truth of the matter is that our networks, those people who hold on to that information, how many people here are from a network? I should ask that first before I'm insulting. Okay, right. Not too many. So I'll insult you too. Networks are now behind on information, right? Because in fact, they're getting it from very, very indirect sources. And the truth is that information is what we rely on. We have relied on it in the media business for 100 years. I started in the radio business. And the way we made programming decisions is how many people called up and asked for the Rolling Stones. And if more people asked for Meatloaf, we paid more Meatloaf records than we played Rolling Stones records, right? It was very rudimentary, but it was information. And as I got into the television business, I got the same ratings that we all get, the ones that I was just complaining about, but those are very indirect, right? They're based on sampling, on weird information, that comes from handwritten diaries, sometimes from electronic information that comes out. And, the truth of the matter is that we're all making decisions based on that. And the information is, at best, imperfect. It always is. But we are in a world where we have more information and we have available to us more information. About 10 years ago, I got into the internet video business, and I approached it pretty much the way I did, television, which is we made some decisions, we made some shows, we put some stuff on, and all of a sudden I would make decisions, and my crack programming staff would tell me my decisions were wrong, and I would argue with them because I thought I was the smartest person in the room, and then they would turn their computers around and show me graphs that came off of our YouTube channels, and those graphs I saw were more detailed than any piece of information I had ever gotten from any network that I worked with. And all of a sudden I realized why so much of my young staff was staring at their screens all the time, because they were moving the little cursor back and forth, and they were getting minute by minute, second by second information. We started a preschool channel several years ago, and one day they were showing me this graph, and there were these spikes in the graph. And for those of us who are doing preschool in the internet world, we know that nursery rhymes are very popular, and this happened to be a series of nursery rhymes. And I couldn't understand where the spikes were coming from. And they said, oh, well, that's where we take our little logo and we run it across the screen, and it makes little jumps and dances and all that like on the screen. And what's happening is people are stopping the video, trying to figure out who's dancing, and they like go back a little bit and they watch it again, and then they decide they like it and they watch it again and again and again. Our logo is more popular than the nursery rhymes. So I started to, or tried to imagine what would happen if that same thing happened in the television business. And the reality is we would never know that. We could never figure out what to do. And with that information, we wouldn't necessarily know why we wanted to do anything with it. If I had made a suggestion to one of my networks that our logo ought to be the star of a show, they would laugh me out of the room. But what we found out in this information that we had is that we had the data to be able to go and figure out what kind of new show to make. And it happened that my team made a show based on our little logo there, believe it or not, which was a very popular show. The challenge, though, I think for most of us who are producers, is that this feeling that the information and the math will make the difference is frightening. And it is antithetical to the way that we think. But I will give you, I don't believe that that is the case. I don't believe that information and creative thought are the enemies of each other. I think interpretation is. I'll just share a little story with you. I got into the kids business now 35 or so years ago. And my assignment was Nickelodeon, because believe it or not, at this particular time in the mid-'80s, in the United States, Nickelodeon was the lowest rated network in America. I had never worked in the kids business. My partner had never worked in the kids business. And they called us up, and we had just worked on MTV. It had been very, very successful. And they said, oh, maybe you could come and help us with Nickelodeon. And we were like looking at each other, wondering why they were looking at us. We had never worked in kids. We didn't particularly like the kids business. We didn't like most of the shows that we were seeing. I mean, we were in our 20s, and we were much more interested in Duran Duran videos than we were in, Belle and Sebastian. So we go in, we have our meeting. We're, gathering up information, and we said, well, so what do you know about what happens on Nickelodeon? And they said, well, 44% of all people who have Nickelodeon watch it once a week for less than 6 minutes. We're like, okay, and why do you think that is? They said, we can't understand it. All of our shows are really good. I said, how do you know they're good? And as some of you know, Nickelodeon was one of the pioneers in using research with actual children rather than the gut, the instinct of a programmer. And they had gone out and they had tested these shows and shown them to kids really all across America, and found out that they were shows that kids enjoyed, and et cetera, et cetera. I took them at their word. I didn't know any better. And I said, well, why do you believe that if you have such good shows, kids tune in and they stay for less than 6 minutes once a week? And they said, well, I think part of the problem is that we tell kids we're fun, but we're really not. Okay, so my partner and I, a guy called Alan Goodman, sat down and looked at what Nickelodeon was doing all day, every day, and we found out that, in fact, what Nickelodeon wasn't doing was telling the audience a story about Nickelodeon. They were doing what television tends to do, which is watch this show, here's what happens this week on this show, it's a very special episode at 4 o'clock. And we would point out that we thought that, most kids didn't really know how to tell time. Why were they bothering to, tell them what time it was on? And that just telling them what's going on in the episode of a show really wasn't too special. And that Nickelodeon was this very special place. In America at that point, There was 4 hours of television specifically devoted to children every week on Saturday mornings. The most popular show for kids across a week were reruns of action-adventure shows that played after school when they got home. And here Nickelodeon was giving them good programming every single day. And what we suggested was that, in fact, if we could tell this story to kids on a regular basis about why Nickelodeon was special, it would be much more meaningful than Johnny broke his leg in this episode this week, or whatever was going on. And so we reorganized their clock, and long story short, in 6 months, Nickelodeon went from being the worst rated network in America to the #1 rated network in America, where it stayed for 25 years. Because what had changed is those 44% of homes that tuned into Nickelodeon every week for less than 6 minutes were now spending 30 minutes a week with Nickelodeon. And so the exact same amount of people were watching, but they were watching longer, and the ratings went up. Now, the reason I go into this whole story is that that data, that information that we got from what was then at that point fairly simplified information, was really, really critical to our creative decision. We couldn't have made the creative choices that we made unless, in fact, we had that piece of information. There is no piece of creative thought that we can have that happens in a vacuum. It's not like we wake up in the morning and we magically know things. So fast forward this 30 years, when I started seeing those graphs from my YouTube staff in the things we did, I realized something really special had changed in our lives, which was that I wasn't running a channel that I could put my programming on that distributed around the world. We were, but it wasn't the special thing about what it was, that all of a sudden, as a producer, I had information, I had data, I had knowledge about my audience that, in fact, even my network compatriots at the various places that I worked did not have. And that, in fact, that we could spend all day long looking at this information and making decisions. Really, on a quick basis, it took a show that we had that was 5 minutes long and eventually extended it to 30 minutes long based on the information that we developed over the period of 4, 5, 6 months or so. We were able to, by the way, prove against the fallacy that people who watch on the internet have short attention spans. I think in some other group here, there was a conversation about whether people want short-form programming or want long-form programming. I will just make my own statement that people want good programming. And if it's good and short, they will watch it. If it's bad and short, they will click away, and vice versa. But we were able to actually sit there and prove it and make a show go from 5 minutes to 8 minutes, from 8 minutes to 11 minutes, from 11 minutes to 12, 13, 14, up to 30 minutes because of this information that we had. It completely changed the trajectory of our business. We made 3 times more money in that process. We got more viewers in that process. We invented for ourselves a new kind of programming that our company had never done before, all because of that information. So, somebody, one of my colleagues, Greg Little, who I think is here. You hear Greg? There he is. He sent me a note after I told him what I was going to talk about, and I said, why does this even matter? Don't we just make great creative choices? We make it, they will come. And he said, content appeals to everyone is going to be less appealing to any single person in the near future, right? We're used to a world where we're making a piece of content for this many people, sorry, but fairly shallow. And the world that we're going into is actually making content for fewer people, for a narrower group of people, but it's way, way deeper. I was saying to someone this afternoon that we have a show that hasn't had new episodes in 2 or 3 years on one of our YouTube channels. And I got a picture over the weekend from the New York Comic-Con of dozens of people dressed up as the characters in this show that has not been on the air for 2 years. I also know that in the world that we are in, that many adults are watching children's programming and many children are watching adult programming. This is a different world than any of us have ever been in. And that sweet spot that Greg was asking about is that what we are defining in this new world is valuable programming. What that value is still being determined. Anybody who has negotiated with anybody knows that what used to be fairly common, whatever the value was of a show, 5 years ago, is in some places more valuable, in some places less valuable. But nonetheless, that sweet spot is, how do we find those people? How do we satisfy them? How do we take advantage of that depth that is in there? And the only way we can really figure out a way to do that is with the information that is given to us. It's been critical in our business for 100 years, like I said, whether it's newspapers, radio, television, cable television, the internet. The truth of the matter is that we are in a business where it's not about whether it's linear, it's not about whether it's streaming. It's not about whether it's Facebook or Instagram or whatever some 12-year-old is cooking up in their bedroom that will change our future again in a few minutes. The truth is the future of our business is that the audience determines where we're going to be, what we're going to do, how we're going to make our money, how we're going to be happy, and that audience wants everything. They don't want the one thing that we're interested in. They're telling us that they're interested in things they're interested in, and if we haven't learned to follow them, we lose. There's something I've been hearing to sort of end up, because I think my time is up. I think everyone here has heard it, that when something new comes along and you go into one of your colleagues or you go into one of your bosses and you suggest, we should start doing this new thing. And that person says to you, we can't really do that. It will cannibalize our existing business. Has anyone not heard that? Everybody's heard that, right? So here's the thing that I can tell you for sure. Take a look at the record business, because they were the first ones to complain that the internet was going to cannibalize their business. And here's what we're learning, which is they're almost out of business. As soon as you start to hear that the new thing is a problem for the business you're in, quit your job and go do something else, because that company will be out of business at some point or another in the near future. We are in a business where everything counts, where everything the audience wants to do, which is everything. They want to watch on their phones, they want to watch on their iPads, they want to watch on their television sets. Don't let anyone tell you that the television set doesn't work. They want to watch live linear television. They want to watch it coming from a traditional television network, or they want to watch it coming from Twitch out of Amazon. They want to watch on-demand television. I keep saying we are the audience. Every one of us has this behavior that we want satisfied, and if our traditional people who are giving us that stuff do not satisfy us, we're going elsewhere. So the future of our business in 10 years, in 50 years, in 100 years is that everything that's ever existed will continue to exist, and there's going to be more of it yet to come. I personally feel bad that I'm old enough that I'm not going to see like many more generations of this, but I will tell you that as exciting as my career has been over the last 40 years, it's more exciting today than it's ever been before. And I'm thrilled to be part of it, I will tell you. All right, with that end, I'm going to bring my companion, Jesse Cleverly, up. Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you. Right,
you.
We don't have long.
Yeah.
And knowing us, one question will take about half a day to answer.
Exactly.
So,
Jesse and I have been doing these things completely coincidentally on stage for like 10 years. So you're actually part of an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's just dive straight in. So obviously the rumor has it that you may be a broadcaster quite soon, Fred.
I have heard that rumor.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah. From our beloved country of Canada. So when you are that broadcaster and you have what is going to essentially, you're going to be returned to a world of blunt data, but you've tasted the sweet honey of YouTube analytics, but you know what data does. What are you going to be able to do you think, in your blunt place to get sharp again?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
I wish I knew the answer. Okay.
It's going well.
So I think the way to really start looking at it is, one, start to turn the telescope around and look through it a different direction. I think those of us who have been in the traditional television business for the last umpteenth years think the most important thing in our business is the television business. And my observation and my information and data that comes in is television is not the most important part of the puzzle anymore. These digital delivery systems of our video is much more important. So I think that from our perspective, we are actually not going to start by looking at television, but start by looking at digital and find out a really interesting thing. I don't want to make an absolute blanket statement because there are many people here from many places that know things that I don't know about television in their particular market. But my observation has been that when I look at traditional kids' television, there is no indication that the last 20 years has happened. Television is still programming every half hour a new show. The only thing that changes is the names of the shows. There is no indication that the most searched term among kids across the world is Minecraft. I don't think if you look at most kids' television that I look at, you would even know that something like Minecraft exists.
So just in terms of launching, a new, Meet KidsNet 2.0, for you then the relationship between, for example, a digital play and a linear play is that you would almost use digital as the place to learn your lessons, meet your audience, fine-tune your thinking, optimize, and then take the optimized results to linear? Is that the sort of crude boil down of what I'm sure is a far more sophisticated strategy?
I think the way I ended where I said the future is everything is that I wouldn't look at it, and we're not looking at it, as this or that. And we start here and we end here. It's all one thing. And we would use each medium for what it is worth, and they're worth different things. YouTube, as everyone can tell you here, is filled with way too many listicles. My own channels are filled with way too many listicles, but it's because the medium likes listicles for whatever set of reasons today. Could change tomorrow, whatever it might be. Listicles do well on traditional television too, in a certain way if it's a certain subject. But the way that I want to think about it, I don't know what we're going to do because we haven't decided anything yet, is I know that a member of our network recently stopped posting on YouTube and went over to Twitch and does 4 or 5 hours a day of playing video games and talking to his audience while he's playing video games. And he makes a much better living at 4 or 5 hours of live video game play than he did making finely crafted videos that he made for his YouTube channel, which, by the way, he did very well with. I'm not exactly sure what that means for a traditional linear television channel, but it means something. And what we're going to do is pay attention to what we interpret that meaning to be, and then run a linear television channel with that information in mind.
Got you, okay. So, I mean, as we saw, lots and lots of the people, probably the majority of people in the room are producers and are living in a world of no data as a result and making creative decisions, particularly in development. You know, I mean, once you're in production, then happy days, right?
Exactly.
So you're trying to get into production, and you're trying to get into production with something that when you land it on air, it's going to work. So if you were advising any of these guys out there making their creative development decisions about what is the... Because as we said in another conversation that unfortunately you weren't there for, you know, data just tells you what was popular today. It doesn't tell you what's going to be popular tomorrow. So bad use of data is to try and copy, I guess.
Absolutely.
Right. So what is the use of data? How do you make it? I mean, you know, it makes me laugh that you should be on here talking about data when probably everyone goes, well, he's the guy that made Adventure Time, and no one had ever seen anything like that before. So data would not have helped you make Adventure Time.
Data is one of the great reasons that Adventure Time exists. Now, I should just stipulate here for everybody that I was the first person in our office to say no to Adventure Time. I turned it down. So there is no magic like in this body here. I'm exactly the same as everyone else. I thought I was fucking smart, and I thought I knew something. I thought that because I had made hits before that I had really unbelievable judgment and that I could look at a storyboard and look at a presentation and know what would work. But I had forgotten that very classic, or now classic, cliche, in Hollywood, nobody knows anything. I'm at the front of that list. Nobody knows anything. I said no. Luckily, some people in my office convinced me otherwise. So we make the short of Adventure Time. It's one that year of 39 different short films that we made, and it was one of the pieces of magic that came out of that. Penn Ward is truly one of the most brilliant creative people I'd ever worked with. And we asked, and it was up for an award. I didn't even know how the award system found out that it existed because it had never been broadcast. And we asked for permission to put it up on the internet. It's so long ago that it was something called Google Video, right, which, you know, is in the mists of the past. And they said, sure, you know, put it up on, we don't care. They didn't even know what Google Video was, and the person who said yes didn't know that their company was about to launch a lawsuit against Google about video, right? So I put it up on a Friday, and it's a holiday weekend, so I don't get back to the office until Tuesday.
Yeah, and obviously you're not even checking the data because it's Google.
I didn't know anything about data. I didn't know what data was, right? So I get in the office on Tuesday, I get a phone call from my colleague, and he said, well, there's good news and bad news. And I said, what's the bad news? He said, well, Viacom forced a takedown. They've launched a lawsuit against Google on video. I said, oh, okay, good. I said, what's the good news? He said, it got 250,000 views. Now, I just want to say that in the world of views, at that point we figured if we put it up on our blog, by a week from then or 2 weeks from then, we thought we'd be lucky if 5,000 people looked at it who could vote on it for whatever this award was. But it was now 250,000 in a matter of a few days. It got taken down. The next thing we know, someone has bootlegged it up onto the new YouTube, the thing we didn't really know all that much about, and it already had like 1 million views like inside of a couple of weeks. Nickelodeon still turned the show down. No offense, I mean, whatever, they had their good reasons for turning it down. They turned it down 5 times. And every time I walked in, it had hundreds of thousands of more views. And by the way, one of the reasons they turned it down, they said, well, you know, it really looks like a preschool show. I said, well, you know, there's no preschoolers watching YouTube, right? You have to be 14 and over to watch YouTube. And they said, yeah, I guess that's true. Sorry, we're not doing the show. So then we walked it across to Cartoon Network, and their first instinct, a couple of people really liked the show, wanted to do it, but, well, you know, it doesn't look like the kind of show we would do. I go, well, you know, since I went across the street from Nickelodeon to your place, it has another 1 million views. And they're like, oh. But nobody knew what that meant. And so they, you know, dithered a little bit. You know, again, logical, they have business decisions they have to make. Every time we went into a meeting, it had another 1 million views. And all of a sudden, that information told that group that there was something there that should be done.
So, I mean, I get it when it's like a big, tanking, massive juggernaut of a hit. But most, with all the will in the world, most of the people here are not going to be sitting on that kind of sort of irrepressible juggernaut. They're going to be sitting on indicators and sort of behaviors, aren't they? So I'm just trying to sort of, you know, what should they do? Make a short film, put it on YouTube, watch when people click away, and
well, you know, I
there's
think
something wrong with the credits, or you know.
Well, you and I think, have had this conversation, and we sort of sit in slightly different places on it. I really believe that every one of us have to become channel owners and channel runners, not posters of videos. Because if you post a video, yes, you're right, if it is a phenomenon like Adventure Time ended up being, you're going to get that phenomenal result. But interestingly, if any of us was running a traditional television station, we wouldn't gather up video from gather up information from 5 minutes of a day. We would look at every single day, we would put up some kind of content, and we would learn something from that. Yeah. And the truth is, running a channel on a YouTube, or by the way, on Instagram, or on Facebook, or you know, whatever platform you happen to, or on Tumblr, whatever platform you happen to like, if you treat your audience with undependability and unpredictability, they will not give you predictable information back that you can use. Yeah. But if you really run it in such a way that you are looking to get regular information, so that you put up, I'm making this up, a video every day, or you put up 3 videos every day, or you put up 10 videos every day, or you put up 1 every week. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. If you treat it as a data machine, and you give it the respect, and you give that audience the respect that it deserves, which is on some regular basis you give them something, they will report back to you on a regular basis something about themselves, something about the way they feel about what you are doing, and they will give you those nuggets of information that allow you to make decisions.
I'm really sorry. We have to stop now. I would quite happily sit here and do what we normally do, which is go till 3 in the morning, but we're not going to do that, you'll be glad to hear. So, thank you to Fred so much.
Jesse.
Once again.
Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Never anything less than completely fascinating. Thank you all for your time. We know how valuable it is. Have a great rest of Market.
Have a great MIPJunior.
Thank you.